Let's take a look at what kind of entities issue bonds, need the money, and are willing to issue bonds, and investors are willing to buy those bonds. Four major categories of issuers are federal treasuries, the largest bond market in the United States, federal treasuries. Then there are federal agencies. These are organizations that work for the federal government. Then there are state entities that issue bonds. And then lastly, corporate bonds. All right, let's look at federal treasuries. The U.S. Treasury is responsible to manage the cash needs of the federal government. The federal government has a budget and they have cash needs. They have to pay for all the things that they do, and the treasurer makes sure that cash is available to pay all the government's bills. He or she does this primarily, and the treasurer, by the way, is appointed by the president. He or she does this primarily by managing federal debt securities. When they need cash, they issue debt. They borrow money. There are four types of treasury securities. Treasury bills. They have maturities of 4 weeks, 13 weeks, 26 weeks, and 52 weeks. These are treasury bills. Then treasury notes, and they have maturities of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and 10 years. And lastly, treasury bonds. Okay? Treasury bonds have maturities of greater than 10 years. Then we have treasury inflation protected securities, and they're often called TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. There's our maturity of 30 years. All right, all treasury securities are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. That means that the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. government will raise taxes if they have to pay off these bonds, or they will sell federal assets like land or mineral rights to pay off the bonds. That's what that full faith and credit means. It means you've got the backing of the entire federal government. All treasury securities are sold at auctions where people bid on them. They have a stated interest rate and the price that these bonds are sold at. So a contract will have a stated interest rate, and then people bid on these bonds. So demand has a lot to do with, look at that 5, 10, and 30 years. Those are the maturities of the inflation protected securities just came in. 5, 10, and 30 years. All right. My animation's off a little bit. All right, let's take a closer look at treasury bills. Treasury bills are auctioned on Monday and Tuesday of every week. These are short-term cash needs of the government, so they're paid off quickly and then they're reissued. Okay? Individuals can buy bills directly from the government at treasurydirect.com. You might want to go to treasurydirect.com and see what you can buy. They can also buy bills through brokerage firms and through banks. You can go into your local bank, or you can call Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard, and you can buy, or TD Ameritrade. I don't know if you can buy them on Robinhood. I've never looked at that. But you can buy bills. Bills are issued at a discount to their face value. Okay? So this means that you pay less than face value, and then face value is paid at maturity. The difference between face value, between what you pay, and which is less than face value, and face value, that difference is the interest that you earn on the bond. Okay? Treasury bills have almost no price volatility because their maturity is so short. So if interest rates go up and you own a 6-month treasury bill, you're not going to lose value on that treasury bill because the maturity is so short. So when interest rates are rising, a lot of times people will move money into short-term treasury bills. Treasury notes are auctioned 1 time per month. Okay? Treasury bonds are auctioned 8 times per year. And so the government will issue a schedule of when these auctions will take place. Okay? Notes and bonds pay interest every 6 months. Remember, a bill does not pay interest. You buy a bill at a discount and then you get face value. Okay? The 10-year note is the most widely traded treasury. Okay? And it is the benchmark for other treasury yields. So they set the 10-year treasury rate, and then other treasury rates are based on either greater than or less than the 10-year treasury bond. Okay? And so also adjustable rate mortgages or regular mortgages are set, the interest rate on mortgages are set off of the 10-year Treasury. So you got to watch that 10-year Treasury closely. If the 10-year Treasury goes up, mortgage rates are going to go up as well. All right, inflation protected, Treasury inflation protected securities, TIPS. They have a stated coupon rate when they are auctioned, and what happens is to protect against inflation, the principal, the face value on a tip is adjusted twice a year, okay, based on the CPI or the inflation rate, okay. Investors will receive a higher principal amount and higher interest payments if inflation accelerates, and vice versa. If inflation decelerates, you will receive less. So that's how these bonds will protect you from inflation. If inflation picks up, then your principal amount goes up and your interest amount will go up, and that protects you against inflation. All right, let's look at federal agency debt. Let's see how far we go with this. 27, slide 27. All right, so y'all remind me not to go past slide 27. All right, there are two types of agency issuers. Government-sponsored enterprises, often called GSEs. So you turn on CNBC and you'll hear bond guys talking about GSEs, okay? Congress creates privately owned companies and gives them a public purpose. The purpose is to loan to certain sectors of the economy like housing and farming, okay? The U.S. government will back the debt of these organizations with an implicit but not a direct guarantee. So these organizations, when they issue bonds, people believe that the government will pay the interest and principal if the organizations don't. And in fact, there have been times where these agencies have had trouble and the federal government has stepped in and made interest and principal payments, okay? The government backing enables these agencies to borrow at a lower interest rate. Who are these primary government-sponsored enterprises? The Federal Home Loan Bank, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, and these two agencies sell into the residential real estate market, okay? They issue bonds. The Federal National Mortgage Association, Fannie Mae, and Federal Farm Credit Bank. So here's an agency that helps loan money to farmers. So all of these agencies help loan money, okay? All right, the federal government has agencies that issue debt securities. So these are direct agencies. These are not government-sponsored enterprises. These are direct agencies, okay? The debt has the full backing of the government like Treasury securities. So you have government-sponsored enterprises and then you have direct agencies, okay? The primary agencies are Ginnie Mae, the Government National Mortgage Association, and the Federal Housing Administration, FHA. And these basically are insurance programs that tell banks, if you will loan into the housing market, we will make sure that these loans get paid back if the borrowers default, okay? So these debt securities are associated with the federal government, okay? And they have a lower interest rate than securities from other issuers. And that allows the government to borrow these agencies to borrow money more cheaply, okay? Which makes it more affordable for people who are borrowing from these agencies. The interest rates are lower, okay? Because of the government backing, they have a lower default rate, therefore they have lower interest rates, and that makes it easier for people to borrow, less expensive. All right, let's look at state-backed bonds, okay? 4 groups that issue state bonds, okay? States, counties, cities, and improvement districts, okay? Most people refer to all state-issued bonds as municipals or munis. So once again, if you're talking with somebody who's in the bond business and they say it's a muni bond or a municipal bond, it could be a state bond, a county bond, a city bond, or a special improvement district bond, okay? One thing most munis have in common is that the coupon payments that they make are exempt from federal income taxation for the investors who buy the bonds. So if you buy a municipal bond and you receive an interest payment on that bond, you do not have to declare that bond as income. You don't pay taxes on it, federal income taxes. There are special munis that have taxable interest, but they are not very common. So, if you are an investor and you're looking at a municipal bond, you have to ask the broker who's trying to sell you that bond, is it a taxable or tax-exempt bond? All right. There are two types of munis in terms of the backing they get from the issuer. General obligation bonds, GOs for short, are backed by the full faith and credit of the taxing power of the state. So again, if the bonds are issued and the issuer has trouble making the payment, the state will raise taxes or sell assets to make sure that the interest and principal are paid off. Unlimited tax GOs are backed by all state revenue. Okay? Limited tax GOs are backed by revenue associated with a particular type of tax. So once again, when someone says, oh, it's a GO, you have to ask the question, is it a limited tax GO or an unlimited tax GO? GOs are used to fund projects that will benefit an entire community. They are not tied to projects that necessarily generate revenue. Okay? Examples of GO-backed projects include bridges, parks, and equipment. So these things are done for the benefit of the community, but not necessarily, they don't necessarily charge the community for them to be used. Okay? And that's a little different from this type of bond, which is a revenue bond. Okay? Revenue bonds are backed by specific projects that generate revenue. So they're not backed by state tax power, they are backed by the revenue associated or levied or raised by the organization that issues the bond. If the revenue dries up, the bond could go into default. So these bonds don't have the same level of security as a GO. Examples of projects funded by revenue bonds include convention centers, stadiums, airports, hospitals, and water and sewer facilities. These are basically businesses that are set up that are owned by the state or by the city or by the county or by a special district. And if they don't raise enough revenue, you know, if you have a stadium and the fans don't come to support the events at the stadium, then that stadium district or that city or county that issued the bonds could default, and the state would not step in and raise taxes to cover it. A separate category of municipal bond is the school district. Districts are created to meet the public education needs of communities. School districts issue bonds to finance building and equipment needs. So a lot of municipal bonds out there, probably the majority of municipal bonds out there, are used to finance the construction and maintenance of schools. Okay? Generally, GOs are considered to be safer. However, a state or city with a bad credit rating may not have a safe GO. So if you look at California or Chicago or New York, these states do not have a good credit rating, so their GOs are not very safe. Alternatively, a revenue bond backed by a great project may be very safe. So when a broker calls you and wants to sell you a bond, you have to look into the safety of that bond. All right, oops, we have actually gone too far. We're going to stop there. Let's go back here. And remember that I mentioned earlier that municipal bonds are often insured, and so that's a question you have to ask as well when you're looking at these different types of municipal bonds. Is the bond insured? Okay, we're going to stop there. We'll move on in the next clip. Till then, peace out. Shalom.